Hello, everyone. Welcome to our peer-to-peer session, an artist grant and a dream part 2 with Alison Wells. My name is Hendrik Hernandez Resto. I am the creative specialist at New Bedford Creative. Thank you for joining us today. Before I go any further, please enter your first and your last name in the comment section for our records. Please and thank you. Oh, also enter in your emails. This peer-to-peer series is geared to enrich, educate, and connect creatives with our community. New Bedford Creative is the home of artists, creative, change makers, designers, entrepreneurs, and community enthusiasts. The peer-to-peer sessions embraces the pulse that makes New Bedford so unique while also expanding our knowledge and our connections. New Bedford Creative offers many opportunities for artists and cultural organizations. Join our creative directory, apply for one of our grants or calls to artists, list your event on our calendar, all for free at our website, newbedfordcreative.org. Peer-to-peer sessions is supported in part by the City of New Bedford through the American Rescue Plan Award and Arts, Culture, and Tourism Fund, facilitated by New Bedford Creative at the New Bedford Economic Development Council. We would like to thank Mayor John Mitchell, his administration, and the entire New Bedford City Council for their continued support of the creative sector. This is just one component of a broader initiative to boost arts-based economic development and help the creative sector recover from the pandemic. Before I introduce our presenter, I want to go over the format for this session. Once I'm done, I will pass it over to Alison. Once Alison is finished, we will open up for Q&A. I will review the questions in the chat first, and then we can continue on with the Q&A live. We will have about 20 minutes for questions so we can wrap up on time by 2 p.m. So just so everyone is aware, this session will be recorded. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat so we don't miss them when we open up for Q&A. Most sessions throughout the series have been recorded and can be found on our YouTube channel and at New Bedford Creative in the following week. I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Alison Wells, who will teach us what they have learned about acquiring grants, the arts, culture, and being an artist. Now I'll pass it over to Alison, and I will mute myself. Go ahead, Alison. I am muting myself now.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Alison Wells, if you don't know me, and this is part 2 for an artist grant and a dream. And my name, as I said, Alison Wells. I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago. I've been living in New Bedford, Massachusetts for 20 years. I am an artist, an abstract, semi-abstract painter, mixed media lover, and the owner of Alison Wells Fine Art Studio and Gallery. And so this talk is really about how I use an artist's grant to open my gallery, which I call my happy place. And so part 1 was all about setting the foundation, how I came to the US, how I received this grant, and my whole plans for it before, and it changed. And now opening the gallery. So now part 2 is all about, I've now opened the gallery, everybody's excited, I'm excited, and now the real work begins, and fear sets in, and all these different things come into it. And so that's where I'm going to be talking about giving, references to my own journey, but also showing what I've learned along the way. So let me share my screen, and then we can begin. Okay, so before I start, I would just like to thank Margot, Hendrik, and their team at New Bedford Creative for inviting me, having me doing this, for the grants, all of it, and for having all of us here as a community learning from each other. So, part 2. All right, so I'm going to break this down. So this is when, now if you haven't seen part 1, you can go back. It's on New Bedford Creative YouTube page. So you can see that, but you don't need to see it before we're starting. You'll still learn a lot of the things I've learned having this experience. And so here is a picture of my gallery from the outside, my happy place. And I'm gonna divide this talk into different areas that we'll discuss. So hurdles and challenges, create something that works for you, learning from experience, and a little bit about artist grants and why it's important and how it really did change my career as an artist. Okay, so the first part is hurdles and challenges. Now, when I received the grant, and as I said before, I had a totally different concept of what I was going to do with it. I was going to use it for materials, for machinery, different things that will go with for my studio. And that's nothing wrong with that, but what came up was an opportunity. So an opportunity arose that I could have a ground level space. My studio was actually upstairs of that same very building, Cummings building in New Bedford. And so this opportunity, I just figured I could not pass it up. So I decided to do something very, very scary and take the plunge and open a gallery. And so the hurdles and challenges that go into that. So I get everything ready, the logistics of it, paint the space, put up my artwork, advertise. I had the opening. Everybody was excited. People came out, people bought artwork. So I'm all happy. But then, you start to think, oh my gosh, how am I going to sustain this? Somebody already put in the opening night a little negative thread. They were being they were concerned. But of course, that concern made me think more and more. They were like, what happens when the grant money runs out? So I'm like, oh no. So I had a sort of a plan, and I must say, the grant did help. So the grant I had gave us some professional development, like all we have here with trainings and networking. And so I learned how to do a business plan. I learned how to do profit and loss. So those things are important. And this was the first time for me that I really felt like I had to think like a business person. So I had to think about things like having a bank account just for business and for doing my taxes in a certain way, and getting help with that, because I didn't know all of these things. I wasn't taught that in art school. So these things have to be in place. You can't, it's not just a dream like, oh, I'm going to just open a gallery and close my eyes and manifest and hope. And now I do believe in manifestation, but it comes with work as well. So hurdles and challenges. My biggest hurdle was my mindset. How many of you feel like that? The mindset, we have all these thoughts in our head. And then also unlearning practices and old beliefs. So I'm going to go through those too. Okay, my biggest hurdle was my mindset. Oh my gosh, negative talk, negative self-talk. We tell ourselves stories all of the time. We believe them. Now, these stories can come from people from the past. In part one, I talked about a teacher telling me I would starve if I went into the arts. And that has always plagued me for years. I got it out of my head, but anytime I have another challenge, it comes up. I didn't need that teacher to tell me, because once I went out into the world, you hear people's perception of artists and it's not a real job and all these different negative things. So you fight it, but there are parts of you that keep coming back. So the negative talk. But why do we do this? Why? What does it do? Well, it keeps us safe. Now that might be weird, like how does it keep us safe? But it's so true. We're human beings. From the days of hunter and gathering, we always try to protect ourselves. So even now in this modern digital age, we have parts of us that feel we need to protect ourselves and be safe. So even something like talking negative about it, you would think it goes against it, but it's a way of keeping yourself safe or small, because if you don't put yourself out there, you won't fail, right? Another thing would be like procrastination is a way of keeping ourselves safe. Those things, because we are nervous about it. And then you ask yourself, well, safe from what? Failure and judgment. That's huge, because And I read somewhere that suppose we can take a chance, we can follow a dream or goal, and nobody could see, right? We would do it, and nobody will know we're doing it or see or whatever. So nobody could see where we fail. Guess what? We would really go into, because we would be like, well, even if I fail, nobody would see me. Nobody would judge me, right? But many times when we do things, sometimes we could, but a lot of us, for artists, a lot of what we do is very public. So me moving from upstairs in my small studio, making a big move to opening a gallery downstairs, it's very visible. Everybody sees, everybody has the same question. How are you going to sustain this? What's going to happen? What's going to happen when the grant runs out? You know, so those were sleepless nights of how am I going to do this? If it fails, I will just have to understand, yes, but the judgment, the ego, even our ego is there to protect us, you know, as well. You know, so we're trying to keep ourselves safe, but we're keeping ourselves small. Now, are we really afraid of failure itself, or what a failure would mean about us? I say yikes, because then when you ask yourself those questions like, what does it mean if I fail? That means, well, my teacher was right, I was going to starve. Oh my gosh, I didn't, you know, make what I wanted this month. How am I going to pay the rent? All these things. What does it mean about me? Like, why did I think I could have such a big dream? So when we go after a goal, we will get one of two things. The result you want, which is a success. Yay, it happened, feel great. Or the lesson we needed, not a failure. And this is something we have to teach ourselves, because of course, in the moment, it feels like a failure, right? Just recently, a few months ago, I felt that, you know, I had a perceived failure, but when I really sit back and thought about it, it was a lesson learned. And then when I did my numbers and stuff like that, I realized, wait, I didn't really fail. And I gained certain things on that end of it. So we kind of tend to put our blinders in and be, oh, we're failed, you know, and do a pity party. So how many of you have done that? I certainly have. But when we come back out of it and like, okay, let's hit the drawing board again, then you see, oh my gosh, that was a lesson. And many times it's not as bad as you think, but because we are embarrassed or we feel like eyes are on us, so people are going to judge us, those things can really prevent us from taking the plunge. And as much as I was so scared to do it, I'm so glad I did, because I would not be able to be where I am today and to know the people I have or have my community around me. Okay, so unlearning practices and old beliefs. We need to stop listening to our old beliefs and fears. When we don't get what we want, we get too busy in self-pity, feeling like a failure. And, you know, I'm known, you know, I have been there. I know we have all been there. It depends on how long are you there. You do not want to stay there long. You can stay there, you can feel sorry for yourself, but then pick yourself back up. What can you do? And then you do one of two things. If you keep going on like that, oh, I'm a failure, this didn't work, one of two things are going to happen. You're going to repeat the failure, or you're going to give up, right? Many times we might feel, and I've felt to give up many times, but that's why I always say, do what you love, because I love this so much. Even though the thought might come, I want to give up, there's no way. I might change it, I might pivot it, you know? I mean, I don't have the gallery forever, but I've learned so much, and, you know, things change and things pivot. I will not give up on my dream. I'll always be an artist. I'll always be an educator. And that's the thing. So you don't want to repeat the failure, because I have repeated some of my failures because I refused to look at them. I was so much in a pity party that I didn't even want to see where I went wrong. So you need to debrief, like you do something, you launch something. Well, what didn't work? Why it didn't work? Did this happen? Or maybe you had a great product or service, but you didn't market it. So who's going to come? You know, so you need to always debrief and see, well, where? Because many times you do have a great thing to share. It's not you, it's not your product, it's not your service. What other things? So every failure that occurs is a gift of a lesson. My mother used to tell me that all the time. I didn't understand it at first, but it's so true. I'm like, what do you mean it's a gift? It's failure, you know? And I think many times from school and, you know, your teachings, there's this right and wrong on how we learn in school. And if you didn't, you know, if you weren't the top of the class, you felt like a failure. It was made to feel, especially, you know, in the past, things have changed a lot in the education system, and they're realizing children, students learn at different levels and different ways. Yes, so, all right. So new solutions. So talking about that, I just wanted to show you and give some examples of little things. So I knew I had to make my business proposal, and I knew that when I go in, I have my artwork on the wall. It's not going to be just that. I can't, you know, I'm not going to be able to sustain it with just pieces, artwork, and think that people are just going to come and buy. And I did have a clientele already. I did have some collectors that I had from my studio upstairs, but I had to think further into how I needed to do things. So you must be clear about, well, if you're doing something like this, well, I decided, well, I am teaching, I'm a teacher, so I'm going to be doing lessons. Now, you don't have to be, you could be doing classes. It doesn't mean that you have to have gone to school to be a teacher. What is it that you like to do? Can you teach somebody? Can you maybe just lead a group of people coming in and doing whatever it is that you're doing? What can you do to bring in revenue? So I was teaching, but also I was selling cards and I was selling prints. Now, this didn't come right away. And in the last part one, I talked about my mother suggesting that I make cards, note cards, and I told her, no way, that's selling out. So I come from fine art background, art school. And so that, you know, seemed like a sellout. You don't do that. Also, you don't sell your own artwork. You get a reputable gallery to sell your artwork, and a museum, and all of these things. But, you know, the reality of it is not everybody gets into, you know, these big galleries in New York City and other large cities. And so what can you do? Do you just sit back and wait to be discovered? No, you sell your own work. And I was selling my work before. So I didn't want to take that as that was the only thing. And I definitely went through the gallery route as well. And that was nice. There were some ups and there's some downs. And I will talk about that because I have a training about that as well, gallery representation. But that was part of the reason why, you know what, I can sell my own work, but I have to see what else is there. So I was selling cards, but little things like when I started to sell cards, I didn't even have them in little plastic bags. You know, I just had them there, and then of course in a basket, and people were touching them and then they got dirty. And then I'm like, oh, I should really. So I remember going to a festival and seeing somebody had lovely card displays and with the little plastics. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? So then I ordered that and I had them in plastics. Then I had them in the basket, but they still weren't selling. Why aren't they selling? Then somebody donated one of these, the tabletop one on the left, the print rack. And then suddenly people started to buy the cards. And that's how it's like trial and error, little things. So I said to myself, when I came in, I'm like, well, I'm going to sell cards. So if I sell this amount of cards, then I can pay my rent if I didn't sell enough paintings that day or whatever. And then they weren't selling because I didn't present it. It wasn't that I didn't have a good product. I wasn't presenting it in a professional manner. And then last part one, I had mentioned that a community gallery here, Gallery X, they had donated this lovely big bold card holder, the one on the right. And then that's amazing. I started to put my cards in there. The cards flew out of there. So think about how I started my card sales. I'm like, the cards aren't selling. So I felt like a failure because I wasn't making money with it. I thought I would make on the cards, but it was all displayed. It wasn't the product itself. People loved the product. And then, so I did other things. Like I decided to do this whole project where I wrote all the businesses in New Bedford. I had this beautiful brochure of my New Bedford series in cards, and I sent it to them, you know, with special offerings. And if you buy this amount, you can buy in bulk and whatever. And I was so proud of it. I took so long to do that. And then it was like crickets. Nobody bought. And then, but then I felt like, oh no, what did I do wrong? But I said, okay, let me go back to the drawing board and leave it for a while. And would you believe I get orders now from different companies and businesses? It just wasn't the right time, and maybe also how I was marketing. So you always have to ask yourself, is this, don't just give up on it, but see where it didn't work and how you could improve it. Okay, new solutions again. So here are my prints. Now, this didn't happen right away. This happened maybe a year into me being there, a year or two. And I've always wanted to get into artist prints, like Jiggly prints, quality art prints. And I never wanted to. It can be pricey, but if you buy in bulk, it can lower the rate, etc. But they would still be cheaper than my larger scale paintings, original paintings. So that's a nice offering, as well as the cards. So, but it took me a while, and then I did my research. I knew somebody who was in printing, and I talked to them, learned everything about it. But then I made a mistake because I just randomly went and started to do prints of any and everything I had. And some sold, but then others just stayed there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I wasted all this money because I didn't do my proper research. Now my prints go really well. But why? Because I make sure and do research, ask questions to my following online, my email list, the people who come through the doors. What are your, and I observe what their favorite pieces are. What are the popular pieces in the gallery? So instead of just going and printing everything, so then I realized, oh, these are the more popular ones. So I don't have prints of all my stuff, but those are the things you have to do and see how it works as you go along and not feel like just a failure. Because I did feel like a failure, and I spent a lot of money on some prints that didn't move, right? But then I realized, okay, so you will go through these ups and downs. All right, kids classes. So then I started to introduce my teachings because I realized, okay, I have to pay my rent for this place. This is my happy place. It's my studio. I'm selling my artwork, but not every day you're going to be selling an original piece, far less for a large scale piece. And I love to teach. So I was teaching just individual kids, one-on-one. And that worked for a while. But then I realized, well, if I had more, like a group of kids, I can get them all on one day. And so I had to learn with that as they went along, and then I would have certain days that I would teach. And this was the first time, bringing them into the gallery. Now my gallery is not very large. It's long and slender. And so the gallery space is where I do everything. Like my classes are held right here. My openings are held right here, And so, yeah. So that's it. I did the cards, the prints, my teaching. So this is keeping me above float. And I'm learning how to piece things together. I'm learning to make a plan. How much do I have to pay for rent? How much? The good thing is I had very low overhead. So I'm not a brick and mortar business where I'm buying and selling stuff. I'm not really buying and selling stuff. The only thing I started to buy were my cards first. And then a couple of years after, the profit I'd made, I put that into my prints. So then I had to be careful with my prints. But most of the things are what I made myself. Okay, so exercise. So I usually like to give an exercise of each section. So hurdles and challenges. Write down a specific time you experienced a perceived failure. What were the emotions you felt? What did you learn from it? I think that's so important. Like, as I said, the last time I felt that way, I journaled and write about it. Why did I feel this way? What came up? All of these things. Also, write down old beliefs or practices you have to unlearn today. All the things like that whole talk. And I was talking with Hendrix last week after the live about this whole concept of selling out. And we just have to let it go. We're there worrying about other people and what they're saying about us and not crafting the business for us, not making it our own. So, take out what you think you're selling out, because I'm not selling out. As soon as I opened this, I realized I needed to wear another hat. I had the hat of a business person. And I never did that. I never went to business school. So I had to start thinking like a business person. And then when I was in the studio, I started thinking as an artist. But those are very different things. And we do have to understand their place. We do have to step into separate roles. Because if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to get in trouble with the tax man. If you don't pay your rent, if you don't see how this month you're going to bring in certain revenue. So these are things like when I was upstairs and I was an artist, but I was still teaching. I taught part-time. I taught at BCC part-time. So I didn't have that, freak out like, what if I can't do this or that? But here I'm full-time, full in. And so I had to think differently. Okay, so write down all beliefs or practices you have to unlearn and write down the solutions or strategies you can implement to overcome these logistical challenges, okay? So when you write these things down, it kind of helps, I don't know, just start writing and it really opens your mind to different concepts. All right, 2, learning from experience. And as I said, I started to kind of show that, like with the cards and the prints, I'm learning little things that worked, what did not work, and on to the next. So the value of learning from failures, feast and famine. And that's something I love to say all the time because we artists love to do that because we're in a business where it's feast and it's famine. And there would be times like I would make so much money from my artwork and I would just be, wow, this is incredible. And then like, dun, 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 nothing, desert, right? So in the days when I had my studio and I wasn't thinking like a business person, it was feast, party time, vacation, spend the money, etc. Now that you're a business person, feast days means put it away, put it back in the business, be very, very deliberate on what's happening because, there might be times of certain months, I can picture certain times and certain months that are not as profitable. So you have to think about that. We have winter in the Caribbean, we don't have winter. So it's like business all year round. But then what happens in January, February, March, in the cold months when people are not out and about or maybe not buying as much right after Christmas? What happens around that time? Okay, celebrating successes as integral components of growth. So those are the 3 areas. And I'm just showing you, these are like flyers I did because this is how I always believe in celebrating your successes. So this was my flyer for my 8th anniversary celebration and the 9th, which was last year. And this year is going to be 10 years in my gallery. Woohoo! But every single year I celebrated. The first year, because I was looking down the line in terms of what I wanted it to be, etc. But I wasn't taking anything for granted. I mean, this is something new to me. I'm not a business person. My teacher said I was going to stop. So I'm just like, I'm just being blessed for what I have each year, each month, and I'm taking it like that. And so that's, always celebrate your successes. It might be small little successes, celebrate it. I remember my first year anniversary. I had a huge cake. My friend's sister made it for me. She has a bakery. And it had a big paint palette on it with number 1. And, people came in, we had cake and we just celebrated. And, I just think it's really important to celebrate your wins, no matter how small. Okay, so exercise 2, learning from experience. So you learn your experience, write down a major success or milestone for you. How did you celebrate this achievement and what did it teach you about your potential? Okay, what was your major success or milestone? So me, it was moving in here and the way I felt. Of course, I had doubts, but I'm learning from my experiences and I'm celebrating the little wins. Every time I sell a piece, like I've been selling my artwork for many years now. It never gets old. It never gets boring. I never, ever take it for granted. Some months might be slow and somebody will come in and maybe I just sell a few cards in, that week. And I'm giving thanks for the sale of the cards. And so always remember that. And also write down the ways you've grown personally and professionally in your creative business. So you're thinking you're growing professionally and you're moving forward, you're learning. but it's also personally. Like I put those two together because I have never been so challenged and stretched as being my own boss, as being an entrepreneur and following my dream, because nobody's there anymore. I don't have a side thing. This is my thing, and I have to focus on it. And it really sometimes it gets to you because, as you say, something fails and you go through a pity party. So it's a personal growth. Every time I go through that, it's a next level. And the interesting thing is that once you overcome certain hurdles, I'm like, wow, I made it those few years. And wow, I didn't think I would be selling this level of paintings, or the first $500 painting, you sell like, oh my gosh. And then when you sell the next level, like $1,000 painting, a 2,000, when you sell your first $10,000 painting, then it's just like, no. And then guess what? The whole cycle goes back again. I listened to this woman. She's a money mindset coach. Now, I do a lot of personal development and professional development. It keeps me on my toes and about money. And I needed to learn about money mindsets because many of us have these limiting beliefs about money. We don't even realize we go into business and wonder why it's not making because we have those. So she would say, new level, new devil. And it's so true. So I've come so far and now I'm here, but guess what? New devil. So then, oh boy, the challenges again. So I have to go back and write down, oh my gosh, why do I think I'm a failure? What did I do? For me to reach this next level, because it's a mind shift. You might think you're dealing with your mindset, but it's a consistent thing because you're constantly going to the next level. So you're not just good at that level because you want to grow. Maybe you might say you want to stay here because, again, the fear, right? But you are going to constantly grow and stretch yourself. Okay, number 3. Check the time. Creating something that works for you. This is my favorite part because I, again, had a concept of what the gallery was going to be. I'm selling my own paintings. I don't need a gallery. I'm going to sell my paintings. It's all about what sales can I do? I'm selling cards, prints, originals. I'm doing my teaching. I'm being able to pay my rent. And, I'm breaking even. And then, few years go by. Ooh, I make a little profit. And I'm focusing on that business. But then you have to see as things go by, what works for you? Are you doing things that make you happy? So initial perceptions of what a certain business model looks like. So I'm looking at other galleries, but I wasn't realizing I'm looking at commercial galleries that are run by non-artists, and what that looks like. It's very different to an artist-run gallery. You selling your own work and sometimes other people's work, or an artist co-op. Very different concept. So initial perceptions of what a certain business model looks like versus what actually works for you and your business. So I learned that a little later on, but when I learned it, it just hit me over my head. It's like when you start crafting the business for you, that's when things really happen. So I started to learn from different things, and I decided teaching kids wasn't really where I wanted to be anymore. It was nice at the time, but now I teach adults and I teach teens, young adults who are very interesting. But before I was teaching as young as 5, and bless their hearts, they're lovely. But as I get older, I could not keep up with this and the touching and the gallery and all that. So, okay, no more of that. So now I have one-on-one adult students. So this is my gallery, and this is, I have my little studio with them in there. So this is not what you think a highbrow gallery. Like when we have the openings, it does kind of look like a highbrow, but then this is now studio mode, classroom mode. So my galleries switch, characteristics and personalities as it goes, but I'm making it what it is for me, what lights me up. So teaching these adults really I enjoyed. So I would do personal classes, one-on-one, small 1, 2 at a time. And then I realized, well, I needed to scale it a bit, and more people were asking me for workshops. So I started to do workshops where I have larger groups. And there we are in the gallery again. So larger groups, the gallery can hold comfortably 8 people with the large tables down the center. And again, that worked well for me. So I realized that kid classes didn't work. Now the adult group classes, because one-on-one is nice, but it does take a lot of time. So if I can get more people in the class, we all learn together, and it actually works better because you have a community of people sharing ideas. And that's another group here. Okay, and now, so we have the classroom gallery, but now we have the gallery. So then we started, now this is something I wasn't doing before. I wasn't showing other people's work, I was just showing my work. But then I just got this really great feeling about other artists and wanting to show, I have this space, I want to help, I want to show. And so I started to do shows. And this was a textile show. We have some work hanging from the ceiling. We got some interesting things, and it was really lovely. Community came out, and I realized this is what I love, the community coming into the gallery. So the space became different every time. This was some other shows there. I had drawings. That was an interesting show, the one with the black frames going all the way around. It was drawings by an artist who went to Swain School years ago, and he's a portrait artist, sorry, and he did a whole series of mugshots, like actual mugshots he got online. So that was interesting. We had him talking. There were people who were interested in the work, people who were against it. We had like debates about privacy and stuff like that. But as he was saying, this was online. So it was like conversations that we were having. And at the top, we had another textile show. I'm not a textile artist, but I loved it. And March was Textile Women's Month as well as Textile Month. And I collaborated with the art museum who did textile shows as well. We had ceramic shows. At the bottom, we had a photo show. So these are just a little stitch, pick stitch of different shows that we had at the gallery. So I'm so proud. When you look at the gallery, you see it in all its form, classroom form, gallery form, right? And this was a show I had in collaboration with the New Bedford Historical Society, New Bedford Art Museum, and Third Eye. And so we had an artist who did portraits of the civil rights movement, civil rights leaders. And so she had so much work. Half of the work was at the New Bedford Art Museum. And they asked if I would have the other half. And they were working in collaboration with New Bedford Historical Society. I was blown away. So these are the things, when you allow yourself to open up, like who knew? When I moved in, it was all about paying my rent, sale, what next, what next? And now I was opening myself to collaborating with big institutions, you know, the Historical Society, the Art Museum, and then we had a poetry and we collaborated with Third Eye. Youth Speak Out. So we had young poets come in. Look at the gallery again. Look, if we put chairs all down and the work is on the side, a very different look. And I remember the opening night when I opened the gallery, a friend of mine and mentor came to me. He's an art critic. And he said, you know, this is great that you're opening a gallery and whatever, but the fact that it's your gallery and you're showing mainly your work, but you have to think about always keep it fresh, always keep it fresh. So even when I have only my work in here, people will come in and like, oh my gosh, it looks different. Oh, I've never seen this piece before, but the piece has been there, but just different. So always keep it fresh. Same thing with, you know, having some guest shows and stuff. The gallery is always reinventing itself. This was a nice collaboration as well. African head wrap. And I collaborated with the Historical Society and the Art Museum. And would you believe, I met this woman and her daughter, so a mother-daughter team. I met her at a reggae, reggae concert at Greasy Luck, which is just around the corner. And they have large, you know, performances and stuff. And she's from Jamaica, I'm from Trinidad. So we're like, oh my gosh, Caribbean sisters, what do you do? And she says she does head wraps. I'm like, And she said she does workshops. I'm like, well, would you like to do a workshop? And so it all came together, and this is what happened. So we actually had the workshop at the Art Museum. New Bedford Historical Society sponsored it. And then they set up their shop in my gallery, and they sold work through there. So it was a lovely collaboration. So always think of that. Another one, poetry reading, collaborated here. So after the fest, they came here for poetry readings. So I'm having poetry readings. I'm having live music for AHA nights. And so I'm just showing, this was recent. This was Pride AHA, which was just Thursday. So bringing the community in, these are some of the musicians I've had in the gallery. So I'm showing all of this to show that you're open to changes. You're open, allow your business to show you where it wants to go. And think about what it is, you know, creating something that works for you. That works for me. I love having the community in. Poetry readings, you know, talks, all these things like art shows, etc. So it really, it changed a lot. And because of that, I became part of the community, giving back. So before it was all me, 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 me. And this is what I learned. Many times when you open yourself up and you bring in the community and you're giving to people, that is when they come in. You know, and I realized it was all about communication. It's all about relationships. For me, business, selling my work, teaching, it's relationships. And so I learned that as time went on. Like I didn't think of that at all when I opened the business. So exercise 3, write down your initial expectations of owning a creative business versus how have your views changed over time, okay? So your views will change, your interests will change, and that's okay. Maybe you might have been interested in one thing 1 year, now you're interested in another. Also write down your current vision for your creative business. Update every year. It changes. We change as humans. Life and the world changed. The pandemic, that changed a lot for me because my studio was closed. I couldn't sell my work. I couldn't sell anybody else's work. I couldn't teach. So because of that, I now pivoted my business. So now I have been, this is very new to me, pivoting online and doing online courses. I have a membership online, and that's challenging in itself. New level, new devil. I'm learning so much. As I said, I got the ArtNet grant last year, and I used it for that, to hire a coach to teach me how to do these online things. And it blew my mind. It's amazing, but it still is stretching me in ways that, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, I did the gallery. That was so scary. Now this is scary, but that's how we grow. Okay, 4, grants. So I just want to talk about a little bit about the benefit of grants, financial support, professional development, creative freedom, and finding grants. But not too much in it, because I'm not saying that this presentation wasn't all about the ins and outs. It's not a grant writing presentation, but showing how a grant helped me, an artist with a dream, make it a reality. So grants help in financial support, funding that can cover project expenses, materials, living costs. You know, it could pay for your studio space, so you don't have to feel pressured. Allowing artists to focus on their creative work without financial stress. That can really get you when you have the financial stress. You can't be creative. So these are different ways. I mean, I'm sure you all used your ArtNet or any grants you got in many different ways. Or maybe like me, you had an idea for one thing and it changed. Unlike loans, grants do not need to be repaid, which can significantly reduce financial burden. So grants are really helpful. Professional development. Receiving a grant can enhance an artist's resume, portfolio. So for me, I've used grants to hire a photographer. You know, I try to take my own pictures and they always have something on it. I like to use heavy gloss on my paintings. So it's so hard to get it. So I hired a professional to do my paintings, and, you know, grants can help with that, making them more attractive to galleries, collectors, and other funding opportunities. Grants often come with networking opportunities like this, workshops, mentorship programs that can help artists grow professionally. And, New Bedford Creative does that. So here we are with trainings, with motivational speaking, with networking. We learned so much. I've learned so much from each other. We have so much to teach each other. So grants come with that. The grant I got that helped me open my gallery 10 years ago, gave me a financial boot camp. It was all day intensive. And also we were taught how to do business plans. So that was a world of information for me because I never knew it. So the grant is not just money you get, but you're getting this invaluable training and workshops and networking. And creative freedom. Grants can give you creative freedom. Many grants are designed to support specific projects or experimental work. Sometimes somebody just wants to take a break, like a hiatus, and just be in their studio. Wow, would I love that? Just lock the door and be in your studio, almost like a residency. A grant could help you with that, giving artists the freedom to pursue innovative and personal projects. Grants can provide the resources necessary to explore new mediums, techniques, or concepts without financial strain. So we all know financial strain can really prevent us. We get scared, we end up pedaling back and going back to old ways, or, and not fulfilling our dream fully. And the grant can really help, an artist grant. And of course, when you're in business, you could also get business grants, but we're focusing on art and artist grants. And then finding artist grants, for me, I keep it very local, but you can go far and wide with finding these artist grants. Like we have the ArtNet here. So art organizations and institutions, for some of you who will be watching this now or later, you may be outside of Massachusetts. So, the grants we're talking about are here, but think about different local art councils. Many cities and states have art councils that provide grants specifically for local artists. Search them out. Also, networking and community. That is a huge one. Join artist communities. We have a great big artist community here. So if you're in another city or state, or you just move somewhere, find your local communities. Follow influential organizations that fund the arts. When I received that grant from Assets to Artists for artists, it was somebody who was a director of one of the big institutions who just happened to send me an email. Check out this grant. I see this grant, and just pass it. And that's the generosity of people. They see something, they think of you, they send it. So follow organizations, be members in them, and you will hear more of these things. Attend grant writing workshops. These workshops can offer valuable tips on how to write successful grant proposals. And so even New Bedford Creative, when they hosted ArtNet, they hosted, meetings and trainings that tell you how you could write them, because I don't know if but grants can be very scary. They grant, oh my gosh, you need to be professional and learn how to grant, but you can learn in many ways. You go to these information sessions. So New Bedford Creative had many information sessions. I went to one of them, answered all my questions, and takes away the fear. And there are people who can help you write. You can start to write, and then you could ask for, a meeting with somebody, and they can look it through for you. So don't do like me. That was my first grant. But before that, I saw many grants and I didn't. I was scared. I was nervous. Or I was like, oh no, I'm not going to get it. It's only people who know how to write grant, So don't let that negative thinking, again, do that. So online database and resources, Google it. We have the internet wide and far. So you can find and search for grants related to the arts. Okay, so that was a mouthful. I'm exhausted. I hope you're not. But it was a lot. But just to recap, hurdles and challenges, identify them, because they are sneaky. They will come up. Your mindset will come up, and it'll be like your saboteur, your sabotage. Learn how to confront it. Okay, create something that works for you. So important. The day I started to craft my business the way I want it to be. Because it's very, you can't come in here and say that, oh, it's just a commercial gallery. It's so not that. It's so many things. It opens to the community. It's so many things. You can't pinpoint. And I love it like that. Learn from experience. So what works, what doesn't work? How can I pivot? How can I change? And research artist grants. They can be your savior. Could you imagine one grant can help you to open your business? And it doesn't have to be a brick and mortar business. It could be an online business. It could be a service, you know. So open your mind to that and see what can happen. And that is my presentation for today. These are just ways you can contact me or stay in touch. But that is it. And also I have another slide that just shows the next time I'll be doing this will be Tuesday, the 2nd of July, 1 p.m. And I'll be talking about emails and why it's so important. So you can sign up for that on the New Bedford Creative page. But here are ways that you can keep in touch. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Alison. That was amazing, as always, and extremely insightful. At this time, we're going to open it up for questionings. Did anybody put anything in the chat for a question? Let me take a look. Let me look. Oh, yes, there is. Hades or Hades, I always butcher your name every time we do this. I'm so sorry. Have you ever had other artists leading workshops in your gallery?
Well, like I said, not an artist like myself, a painter, but we did have the head wrap. So we had a head wrap. I had somebody leading a poetry group, a writing group, so stuff like that. Yes, so I'm open to that as well. That would be lovely.
All right, that was the one question I saw in the chat. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask now? Unmute yourself, go one at a time. We'll figure out the order, but go right ahead and ask questions. We did this last time too, where we were like, silence means you did a great job.
Well, if there are no questions, I would like to just make a comment, Alison, that this is a super fascinating way to talk about grants because we have archived on our New Bedford Creative's YouTube page people who talk about how to write a grant, how to research a grant, how to, you know, find opportunities for yourself. But really the mindset is so critical of staying positive, of, you know, not listening to the negative self-talk, because it's real easy as someone, I write grants as well, and we give out grants. So I'm on both sides, and it's easy to take that rejection letter as a failure. And so, you know, in at least in our grant giving, anyone who does not receive a grant from us has the opportunity to meet with us so we can review your application and see, you know, what might you change in the future so that you do score within the funding range. And there's always reasons why funders will fund certain things and not others. So context is really decisive, and having that positive mindset is critical. And thank you for walking us through your journey, because that's really inspiring.
I had one question. I thought it went into the chat, and maybe it went into one person's chat instead of for everyone. Hi, everyone. Hi, Alison. I have one personal question for you. How do you handle production fatigue? You're writing grants, you're hosting workshops, you're constantly changing your gallery space around, you know, you're wearing a lot of hats all the time. How do you manage that high level of fatigue that comes with, you know, the level of productivity it takes for us to be, you know, sustainable artists?
Yes, great question. The thing about it is that, okay, so artists, we are known for the hustle, you know, give me anything. And it's also a fear of lack. So we want to say yes to everything. Do this, do this, do this. And so we cannot do that. We will burn out. And I have burned out. So there, you start to think of things, okay, what can I put to the side? What can I get rid of? What can I replace? Like the kids were draining me. So I needed to stop teaching kids. Okay, so then the lessons, the art lessons, like I was doing them, quite often. So the winter, spring, summer, fall, along with other things. And I think when I really started to pull back and when I started to burn out was during the pandemic, when I realized I could pull myself back from this. So when doors opened again, I did things very differently. So I wasn't teaching as much. So then I decided, okay, well, I will give workshops, but it will just be a handful and it will only be in the winter time when, the traffic is not a lot, things are lower. So that's when I would do my, February, March, January, that time. And so I rarely give art lessons, art workshops later on in the year. So I've pulled back from that teaching. And then there are other things. So now I'm online and I'm really feeling it, doing all these things. And I had to pull back. And I also had to take the leap. And I don't know if any of you did, because for my gallery, I man the gallery. Like sometimes I would have help if I have a big function, to help take sales or whatever, or somebody will help me, cleaning up the gallery or rearranging, but I don't have like full-time help. But since I've been online, because it's something that's so new to me, you have to know where your expertise is. So in things that are not your expertise, I'm online, I'm doing a lot of tech things that take longer for me to think of and learn, and I'm learning a lot. But I recently hired a VA, a virtual assistant. That was huge to me. So now when you start outsourcing, you're like, oh no, but this is money I'm paying somebody, I can do it. But guess what? If you're doing everything, you're doing things that are outside of your expertise. You need to be doing what is in your expertise and then outsource. And it seems easy because it is cost. You have to pay. But think of like maybe little areas. And sometimes it really isn't as expensive as we think it is, right? You can hire a VA for something that you're doing now for 1 month, or, maybe a few hours a week or whatever it is. And so yes, I am experiencing burnout and I need to scale back. So I have scaled back a lot. Also, the pictures I showed you about the gallery and the guest shows, that was the entire gallery. So I was curating and setting up the entire gallery like every month for a few months back to back. And it was beautiful. Everybody came in, we sold artwork, all of this stuff, but it took a lot out of me. So I haven't shown a huge guest work like that. Usually I'd have a guest wall now, because I also noticed that some of my die-hard collectors would come in and not see any of my work on the wall. And they would be pissed. And then so I have to remember that I do have my collectors who want to see my work. So I would have one wall like behind me will be my work, and then I have another that will be guest work. But what I have started to do is just kind of have guest work rotating. So ever since the pandemic we came in, I would have a few guest artists, but I wouldn't have big shows because it does take a lot. So you have to look and see where you can pull back. But you're right, you cannot do everything. And if you do, you will burn out and then nothing will happen. So right now for me, I've pulled back in I've said no to so many things. I'm like, oh my God, did I just say no to that? And they're good things too, but you have to now be very clear what to say no to, what to say yes to. And my big thing is I need to carve space for my studio time. So it is hurting my studio time. Like I remember the days of upstairs in my studio. I mean, full-on days of just in the studio, door locked, nobody, and I haven't done that in a long time. And 2 years ago, I did an art residency through my friend McLeana, who just spoke. She told, and that's the thing about community, when you know people are like, oh, I know of this opportunity, I know of that opportunity. That was the best thing that happened to me in a while. If I remembered I was an artist. I think I got so caught up with the business and I like it. I love to market. I love marketing. So it's something, but then and it's creative to market, but I'm a visual artist as well. And I yearn to paint. So I am now carving time out. So I have been carving time out for my studio, which is nice. You're welcome.
Any more questions? Please feel free to chime in. We'd like this to be an open conversation.
If I may ask one other question, and I'd like to direct it to Alison, Margot, and Hendrix. Writing grants is new to me. I'm only about 2 years into starting writing grants and getting grant funding. And there's a lot for me to learn. My question is grant writing something that should just be a part of your fiscal year, part of your administrative tasks that you're working on it a little bit at a time throughout the whole year? Or do you just kind of do what many of us do, and that's, crunch time and get it in at the last minute? I mean, what's your advice when you're writing grants? Like, my Hendrix laugh. He's like, yep.
Anybody else want to go first? Please take the floor.
I will say, so I will research what grants are appropriate for us to apply to. As Allison has referred to this, like, things really never go as planned, or sometimes they go as planned. For artists in Massachusetts, the low-hanging fruit, the easiest way to get into grant writing is through the Mass Cultural Council, through the local cultural councils, because every town and city in Massachusetts has a cultural council and grants available. The larger the population, the more money they have to distribute. So New Bedford last year distributed $140,000 in grants. That the maximum amount you could receive was $4,000, but you can do a lot with $4,000 as an artist. So that I do recommend, because it is potentially, it can be pretty impactful in your creative practice if you receive an artist grant, like Allison received the Assets for Artists grant. We just gave out 100 ArtNet grants for artists here in the city of New Bedford, and there are private foundations that have grants for individual artists. So yes, and diversifying your revenue streams is critical, is what I would say. So grants can be one thing. As opportunities come up, the more that you write grants, the less intimidating it is. And I must say that for someone who just, I'm about 6 years in of writing grants myself, so that we can give out more grants. I applied for the National Endowment for the Arts for the first time. So writing a federal grant was just about the most stressful thing that I have ever done with writing. It was a roller coaster ride, but we'll find out in November if we're awarded. But now that I've done that, it's less intimidating the next time. So, and do what works for you. As Allison said, for some artists, they don't want to deal with grant applications, final reports, all of that stuff. And that's fine. I would welcome everyone to at least try, because New England Foundation for the Arts has grants. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities out there. So I would love for everyone to at least try a few times to, write grant applications. Does that answer your question, McLeana?
It does. It's more of, I think specifically, when you're writing a grant, right?
Mhm.
Or liken it to like a press kit. So having a press kit for me is very beneficial. You know, headshot, bio, portfolios always updated, a few quotes from collectors. I always have it in a folder and it's easy for me to hit send. Do you do kind of the same thing when you're writing grants? Are you putting together like, here's some folders of collateral that I know they're going to need for these grants, and then do you tweak it for that grant? I'm just trying to figure out better mechanics of writing grants so that it's, you know, I'm being resourceful with what I already have. How am I editing it? And how do I increase my chances of knowing I'm going to get that
I think that that does work, because for the most grants that I've seen are going to need those type of pieces of vital information, and they are human beings on the other side who are reviewing the grant. It's not an AI, it's not a machine, it's not, right? It's usually a group of human beings reviewing it, or it's never really just one person. It's not a machine. So I do think that making yourself, I don't want to use the word appealing, but visible, right, and transparent as to who you are and what it is that you do, and providing actual proof makes you favorable. Yes, I believe that having those pieces of information that you might plug into each grant available, so that maybe if it's not you filling out the grant, let's say it's somebody else that you have doing it for you, or that person leaves, or the next person leaves, or the next person leaves, having that in a file so that it can just easily be transferred. If it's information that's not really going to change or rarely going to change, I do believe that is beneficial. Having, because Rhonda always preaches this, is to have like these almost like templates for the grant that you want to get, and morphing it to the objective, right? And that could absolutely be beneficial. Make sure that the objective fits, right? Make sure that it makes sense. The other thing, the one thing I've always told everybody, and I swear this works, is to at least it's worked in my experience. It's just, if they have an office hours available with the people who do the grant, schedule an office hours. Talk to the person managing the grant, because they'll take the time out before you apply to explain some things. Different organizations handle it differently. I can tell you that my experience with New England Foundation for the Arts was a one-of-a-kind chef's kiss. I scheduled an office hours for any grant that I've ever got with them, and they were extremely thorough. So I do say, but I do think that having things that you can swap in and out to create uniformity across the just to make it easier for yourself. Yes, I do think that works. But grants can be so different between grant to grant to grant to grant. Don't catch yourself just copying and pasting. Very much invest the time that you need to invest into the grant to understand it, and copy what you can into it and paste what you can into it. But grants can be so different from place to place to place to place. Really know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Hendrik, and professional grant writers do this all the time. They have templates, they have boilerplate. So for you as an individual artist, you have your artist statement, you have your biography, you have the history of your creative practice. All of that is going to be relevant in a grant application. The types of grants, you know, like there are some grants that are specifically for your artistic practice, so it's more about your work. There are some grants that are more project-based, so it's about a specific project. Those might require a little bit more work coming up with the narrative. In general, what I've noticed is that most grant applications you're going to have a narrative answering whatever questions that the grant wants to address. Most of them are going to ask community benefit of some sort, at least here in Massachusetts. Like, what is the community benefit of your project? You're always going to have to submit a budget. So learning about the finances, revenue, expenses, that kind of thing. And then sometimes they have a timeline where you have to do planning, planning out, especially if it's project based. Others don't. And or it's what I've seen in other grants, it's like an outcome, like you need to say, we're going to do these 3 outcomes from this grant. So, having the boilerplate language folders set up is going to save you a lot of time. having really quality photos of your work is going to save you a lot of time.
Yes.
And as Hendrik said, if there's an information session or if there's an office hours, take advantage of that, because sometimes the people will give you little tidbits of information that the rest of the applicants aren't receiving.
Yes, that is accurate, and I've seen that experience.
Yeah, the information sessions that you guys put on was very helpful. It answered all the questions, so that always helps as well. And also, along with all of the things that you have put aside that they will ask you that you'll use, also quality pictures of maybe you might have got a grant before and you did a project or whatever, pictures of that, because you might apply for the same grant again, and those are great to have. So last year I applied for the New Bedford local Massachusetts.
Local
The
Cultural Council.
Local
Cultural Council.
Cultural Council, thank you.
Or LCC.
LCC, I should have just said LCC. So I applied for that for my music. So I've been having music on AHA Nights, live music, that's free to the public, open to the public. And I've been doing that out of pocket. And, you know, after the pandemic, things got tight. So you have to like pull back different things. But that's where these grants coming so helpful, because they want you to be able to pull the community in. And especially if you could show them how you are going to use this to benefit the community and have it all together, it helps. So, you know, like, so this year I'm using it and I'm having all this great live music. And so I'm capturing pictures and I'm showing so that maybe I can continue doing that. So there's some grants that people repeat, and then other grants will be very different. But I always think documenting, if you get a grant, documenting what you do really is helpful, whether you can use it again or even for your own benefit.
It is likely that if you do get a grant, I've never not seen this, but if you do get a grant, it's likely that you're going to have to submit pictures or something. So if it's not documentation that you have to submit, like if you got an educational grant and you went to school, all right, you did your thing, upload with the certificate that says you did so, right? If you did a placemaking grant, you're going to need to submit pictures. So do yourself a favor. And I always say this, even if you're not doing a grant, if you're doing anything, pay the photographer. Pics or it didn't happen. And make sure that they're good pics, because that gets you so far. Not just with grants, just in marketing, period. Pay the photographers has always been my motto. All right, this is running long. Do we have any more questions or are we done? Not that we're shooing people away, but if not, I will continue. I want to thank you for your time this afternoon. It was a great session. I also like to thank Alison Wells once again for their hard work. I also would like to thank our funder, the City of New Bedford, for making this possible. Please be sure to visit our website, newbedfordcreative.org. That's newbedfordcreative.org, and join our free creative directory. This is the list that we use to promote on our social media throughout the year. Make sure to add your events, galleries, exhibitions, or more to our calendar page that is linked to South Coast Today. We want our creatives to excel. We are here to help. We have plenty of peer-to-peer sessions coming up. Please join us for our next session, Marketing 101 with Paula Robinson-Deere. That is Tuesday, June 25th at 1 p.m. via Zoom. And I believe it's right there. Oh, yes, I have put it into the chat. So if you haven't registered for that and you'd like to join us for Paula Robinson-Deere session next week, Tuesday, 1 o'clock. We're doing most of these, pretty much all of these, Tuesday, 1 o'clock. And then we're loading them up to YouTube for you to follow up afterwards. But that session for next week is in the chat. Lastly, the recording of today's session will be on our YouTube channel within the next week. You can find us at New Bedford Creative on YouTube. Have a great day, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out.